Bonjour, bonjour, and welcome to another episode of Métis Time Capsule. You're, of course, with your host, Alexandria Anthony. I love a good mystery. Do you love a good mystery? I love a good mystery, but I also love a mystery that has an ending, a conclusion, a happy ending. And this segment, being related to Cuthbert Grant Jr., is something that I hold dear to my heart, and it is the mysterious disappearance of Cuthbert Grant Jr.'s first wife, Elizabeth. She was also known as Betsy McKay. So, really a mystery, and it's not really talked about. There's not too many references about that, and I'm going to research that more. And I am by no means an expert in Métis history and culture. I mean, my Métis history and culture is lived experience. And unless you were on ground zero, you were right there in the thick of things when things were happening, you can't be an expert. We can only glean tidbits of information from fur trade journals, sources, colonial sources. And you know what, folks? We've got to change that. We Métis out there, we've got to take our history back. We've got to cut the sash strings. We've got to take the colonialism out of our Métis history and culture. We got to tell our stories our way. We've got to take ownership of who we are as proud Métis people. Very, very important. So, when we're talking about Cuthbert Grant Jr., folks, he was born in 1793 at Fort de la Rivière, Tremblay, Saskatchewan. And you're going to notice in this historical segment that dates are very, very important in establishing, creating a timeline about this mystery. And around 1810, Cuthbert Grant started to work for the Northwest Company's Montreal offices. He would be around age 17 at this particular time. You're also going to notice in this historical segment that the Northwest Company and the Hudson Bay Company are sort of key players in this mystery, in my opinion and in my mind. And during this time in history, folks, the Northwest Company and the Hudson Bay Company were at odds. They were duking it out. They were fighting for supremacy over the Canadian fur trade. They wanted to be the top dog in the game. So, duking it out, they were enemies, feuding, fighting over the Canadian fur trade. In 1814, this is where it really shifts, it really turns, and Cuthbert Grant at this time in history would be around age 21. Miles Macdonnell, who was the Red River Colony governor, he really upset, and you know what? Rightly so. If you had the threat of your livelihood, who you were, taken away from you, so he really upset the Métis and the Northwest Company traders when he no longer allowed. Can you imagine? I mean, how colonial is that? You're telling somebody that you are not allowing them to continue their lifestyle. So he no longer allowed the Métis and Northwest Company traders to export bison near the Red River settlement or access Red River pemmican. You got to remember, folks, pemmican was a key survival food. It was keeping the Northwest Company traders, the fur traders, alive. It was survival food. So here you have this Red River Colony governor coming. He's got his big hat on and his pants and his boots, and he's saying, "You're not allowed to export bison near the Red River settlement or access Red River settlement." So, good grief, the gall of people to say, you know what? You don't have a right to exist as a Métis anymore. We're taking that all away for you. That's the time, how it was tumultuous at that particular time for Métis and Northwest Company traders. Elizabeth Betsy McKay, she was born around 1799. And here's another key point you want to keep in reference throughout this segment. She was the daughter of a chief trader from the Hudson Bay Company, John James Richards McKay Sr., and of course her mother was Mary Fable. So again, and according to the book Cuthbert Grant of Granttown by Margaret Arnault MacLeod and W.L. Morton, Cuthbert Grant spent much time at Fort Gibraltar in now present-day Winnipeg, Manitoba, and that was really the Northwesters' headquarters in Red River. And along this particular route between Capel and Gibraltar lay, of course, the Hudson Bay Company's Brandon House. And there Cuthbert Grant met John Richards McKay, whose father, of course, had been the master of the post until his death in 1810. With John Richards was, of course, his sister Elizabeth, and the place soon became Grant's stopping place for more than one reason. And this is what is told to us through the book Cuthbert Grant of Granttown. Some accounts have also said that Grant and Betsy courted through correspondence. I don't know how true that is, but I'm just relaying to you one particular source. According to, again, Cuthbert Grant of Granttown, Grant was really secure in his possession of Betsy's affection, and before long was known through Upper Red River that they were lovers. I don't know how that was gleamed upon. And little is known of Grant's and Betsy's love. But if they were indeed lovers in the time of 1813, their romance was soon to be thwarted. And Selkirk's colony really came into conflict in 1814 with the Northwest Company, of course. And we have another source here, and in Peter Fiddler's book, and it's the chapter that is called Helping Selkirk Settlers, and it's page 197. This is, and I quote, on May 22nd, 1814, the journal reported that Elizabeth McKay, the charming half-breed daughter of John McKay, who a longtime Hudson Bay factor and indeed a friend of Peter Fiddler, had actually run away from Point Douglas, which is now Winnipeg, to share her lot with Cuthbert Grant Jr. So here we have Peter Fiddler saying that he was a longtime friend of Elizabeth McKay's father, who was, again, a Hudson Bay Company factor. And several sources have also indicated that on May 22nd, 1814, the pair were indeed married at Fort Gibraltar. And we step back into Cuthbert Grant of Granttown in the chapter number 12, and it's called The Red River Country. And it does say in 1814, the only marriage possible at this particular time in history was a marriage de pays, which means, there was no clergy at this particular time in the country. So a country marriage due to, according to this source, no clergy in the country. I'm not sure about that, but I can only say what this source is saying. Let's keep in mind, folks, that in 1814, the Pemmican proclamation was issued by Governor Miles MacDonnell that said no more, you can't export pemmican and other provisions from the colony. So a very volatile time, 1814. Again, we're going to jump back to Cuthbert Grant of Granttown, chapter 12, the Red River Country. In 1815, so this is a year after supposedly Cuthbert Grant Jr. and Elizabeth Betsy McKay got married according to the custom of the country, we only have a slight glimpse of the young couple. Peter Fiddler, master of the Red River Colony's Fort Douglas, recorded in his journal that Betsy, who had been staying there, she was staying at Fort Douglas, had now gone over to be with Cuthbert Grant at Fort Gibraltar. Makes sense? She probably went home to Cabell for the summer, as this was the year that their son James was born. And at that time, Grant was much occupied with work for his company at these particular posts. So here we have, at the time of 1815, Cuthbert Grant Jr. is a Northwest Company man. He is now married to the daughter of a Hudson Bay Company chief trader, John James Richards McKay Sr. So you can see the possibility of a strenuous, kind of strained relationship where you have a Northwest Company man marrying a Hudson Bay Company chief trader's daughter. I really, through digging through information, I cannot find any further mention of Grant and Betsy during the time frame of 1815 to 1816. In May 1816, during the so-called Pemmican War, Cuthbert Grant and his men, they seized a load of pemmican coming down from Fort Capel, Saskatchewan, and then plundered Brandon House. And we have to remember that Brandon House was established in 1793 by Donald McKay. We sure got a lot of McKays in this story. The victory, and I like to call it, it really was a victory, the victory of Frog Plain, or as Colonial or other individuals like to call it, the Battle of Seven Oaks, took place on June 19th, 1816. And this battle was really the culmination of the Pemmican Wars and the escalating fur trade disputes between the Hudson Bay Company and the Northwest Company. And I mean, that's another key clue. When Cuthbert Grant Jr. and Betsy got married, they were in the midst of it. They were in the pot, the boiling pot, in regards to the strained relationship, the trade disputes between the Northwest Company and the Hudson Bay Company. And a lot of people, I've read an inference that they said that Cuthbert Grant Jr. may have been turning his nose up to the Hudson Bay Company by marrying into the company. There's no valid, there's no basis of fact in that statement. And from what I've read about Cuthbert Grant, I don't think that would have been his character, but I could stand corrected. So Grant, along with his men, during the victory of Frog Plain, were confronted on their way to deliver pemmican and other supplies to the men that were waiting on Lake Winnipeg. And Governor Semple and the Hudson Bay men attempted to detain Grant and his men, as well as to seize their supplies. And of course, a firefight ensued, leaving Grant and his men victorious, rightly so victorious. I won't go into more detail in regards to the victory at Frog Plain. I'll invite you to search out various sources in regards to the victory of Frog Plain, but let's just state it clearly, folks, and this is a fact. The victory at Frog Plain is really essentially one of the first times that the Métis people asserted themselves as the new nation and fought for their right, their livelihood, their lifestyle. So the victory of Frog Plain is very a key important time in the forming of the Métis nation. So where is Elizabeth or Betsy during this time? We have no idea. There's no reference. So if we go back into the Peter Fiddler book, and it's the chapter that is entitled Brandon House and Albany River, page 221, and I quote, during the summer of 1817, Peter Fiddler went out to look over the situation at Brandon, and where he found the house itself was still standing, but practically everything else destroyed or damaged. After staying there about a week, he left for the colony, and we're talking Red River Colony. And on August 21st, 1817, he was accompanied by Cuthbert Grant Jr. And that in itself, I find it odd because we know that at this particular time, Peter Fiddler was a Hudson Bay Company man. And at this time, Cuthbert Grant Jr. was still a Northwest Company man. So this in itself, I find it odd. I don't know if you would find it odd, but I just found it why Peter Fiddler would be accompanied by Cuthbert Grant. And it goes on to say that Cuthbert Grant, he was really in a quandary. He had led the Métis in their attacks on the settlement and at the victory of Frog Plain, leading them into what he truly believed to be their best interest. So here we're saying that Cuthbert Grant really believed what he was doing was in the best interest of his Métis people. This statement is odd. He had swallowed the bait set out for him by the Northwest Company. So, okay, the statement is saying that maybe the Northwest Company set him up, baited him. We don't know. Now that Commissioner Coltman had come on the scene, Grant began to really find himself standing alone. So again, this is another heart-wrenching thing where Cuthbert Grant, after the victory of Frog Plain, really feels that he's left alone. He's left alone on an island. His Métis were dispersing or were giving testimony to Coltman, and the Northwesters were willing to leave him to bear the brunt of policies that they had indeed dictated, but but which he had carried out. So I can really see the quandary that Cuthbert Grant, the turmoil that he was in regards to, Cuthbert Grant at this particular time feels that the Northwest Company had left him alone to bear the brunt of policies that they had told him to carry out. So, is this called being a scapegoat? I don't know. Coltman soon came to realize that Cuthbert Grant, even though he had been deluded by the Northwest Company, he was indeed a man of integrity and was a real leader. Just as the Northwest Company had used Grant as their tool, so Coltman too must use him. So that's a very telling statement. They're saying here that the Northwest Company used Cuthbert Grant Jr. as a tool, and now that Coltman thought too that he had to also use him. But before he could do that, he had to charge him with complicity in the outbreaks, and then, if possible, see that his punishment for these crimes, if any, should still leave him available to lead the Métis into a peaceful future. So this is telling to me. So here we have Coltman arriving on the scene, saying that he would have to use him. Okay, but before he could do that, he had to follow the letter of the law to charge him with complicity in the outbreaks, and then, if possible, see that his punishment for these crimes, if any, there's another telling thing, if any, should leave him available to lead the Métis into a peaceful future. And Coltman, therefore, wrote to Cuthbert Grant advising him to surrender. And he really let Cuthbert Grant read between the lines of Coltman, his desire to really see Cuthbert Grant get off, so not be charged with these crimes. So really, did Coltman realize the same thing that, according to what Peter Fiddler wrote, that Cuthbert Grant was indeed used as a pawn by the Northwest Company in regards to the victory of Frog Plain? I mean, we'll never know for certain. We weren't physically there. So this is in the summer of 1817, and again, there's no mention of Cuthbert Grant Jr.'s first wife, Elizabeth Betsy, or in fact, at that time frame, any disappearance that she kind of took off hightail and left the scene. We get into page 222, and this is more of what Peter Fiddler accounts. So, with Cadeau and some other Métis, Grant was on his way to surrender. And since Fiddler too was heading for the Forks, in which is now Winnipeg, Manitoba, Grant, age 24 at this particular time, welcomed the opportunity to travel with the wise old fur trader. It would appear, according to this account, Grant wanted to really confide in somebody and to ask and seek advice about the quandary, the situation that he was in. Grant unburdened his mind of his worries that the Métis were deserting him, and of his doubts about the future. He also expressed his hopes that when tried for his activities, that he would indeed get off. Fiddler, he really listened to Grant's side of the case, and he, at that particular time, advised him to tell not only the truth, but the whole entire story. Grant had expressed the hope that after all this mess was settled, that he might find employment with, indeed, now the Hudson Bay Company. So let's backtrack. Here, after the victory of Frog Plain, we have Cuthbert Grant Jr., and this is just according to Peter Fiddler. He is feeling alone. He's feeling that the Northwest Company used him as a pawn. They now discarded him, and he was alone, standing alone. And he was questioning his future. And Coltman seen his abilities as a true leader, and he really thought highly of him. And there was clues given that hoping that Cuthbert Grant would indeed get off with no or slight punishment, and he would go on to lead the Métis people into a peaceful time. So, I can see the conflict of the soul, how it would be to feel like you're being used as a pawn. I mean, his father was a Northwest Company man, so with his uncle Robert and many other people. And to have that, at a very young age, to go through that and still appear to be a leader and wanting to fight for Métis rights, to me, is I really think it's important. And we're now in August 1817, and after Cuthbert Grant gave himself up, as suggested by the Commissioner Coltman, Coltman recorded, of course, Cuthbert Grant's uh, deposition on the events of 1815 and 1816. And then he took Cuthbert Grant to, of course, Montreal to face charges of murder, theft, and arson. Grant arrived in Montreal really about the end of October and was held in common jail while awaiting his hearing on the first of the charges, and that of the murder of Kevney. And you can, go into research this alleged murder of Kevney. In this case, his guilt was indeed doubtful, and he was released. So they didn't have enough evidence, cast a shadow of doubt. So of course he was, pardon me, released on this alleged charge of murder. Several accounts indicate that in the year 1817, Elizabeth, or as she's known, Betsy, disappeared with their son James while Cuthbert Grant was indeed in Montreal awaiting his hearing. So, disappear. You know, the McKays were, really highly thought of in regards to the Hudson Bay Company. And why would somebody disappear? Just disappear into thin air. Yet, this is the most puzzling fact of this whole disappearance, alleged disappearance segment that I still is boggling my mind. Yet, in fact, the last will and testament of Cuthbert Grant, you'll see it on your screen, that is dated March 17th, 1818. So one source is saying that Elizabeth Betsy disappeared in 1817. That's where dates are very important. She allegedly disappeared in 1817. Yet in March 17th, 1818, when Cuthbert Grant writes the last will and testament, he leaves his son James by Elizabeth Betsy the sum of £3,000 sterling. Wow! I converted it into today's date, and that is $5,446.96 Canadian. So back in 1818, £3,000 sterling. Man, oh man, you struck the lottery. That was a lot of money. He also leaves his wife, and he's calling Elizabeth Betsy his wife in 1818, after she supposedly disappeared in 1817. He leaves his wife the sum of £500 sterling, and converted to today's date, which is April 11th, converts to $907.83 Canadian. So back in the day, £3,000 sterling, £500 sterling in 1818 was a big sum of money. Stranger yet, can we even get stranger than this? Stranger yet, a last will and testament of Cuthbert Grant that was dated in 1822 now, folks, and you're going to see that on your screen. Cuthbert Grant Jr. leaves, and he says this specifically, his brother-in-law, John Richard McKay, a clerk of the Hudson Bay Company, and this is the brother of his wife Elizabeth, Betsy McKay. So in 1822, long after accounts have said that his wife, his first wife, Elizabeth Betsy McKay, has gone bye-bye, has disappeared, why would he say in 1822, why would he leave, and he mentions his brother-in-law, the sum of 500 pounds sterling, which again in today's conversion is $907.83 Canadian. If his wife, his first wife, Betsy Elizabeth, had indeed disappeared in 1817, like some accounts have said, why on earth would Cuthbert Grant Jr. years later in 1822, another will, and specifically names him by name, his brother-in-law, Elizabeth Betsy, her brother, a sum of money. So if your first wife has disappeared, you don't know where she is, why on earth would you be calling her brother still your brother-in-law, and why would you be giving him money? Grant also, in this particular will, he leaves his daughter Maria, who was a minor at this time, the same sum of 500 pounds sterling, which is $907.83 Canadian. Maria Grant was born in 1820, and her mother was Marie Disappearance. So this is where I have a problem. I got a lot of problems with this story, this strange disappearance. Several accounts have said that Cuthbert Grant's first wife, again, she disappeared. She went poof in 1817. I mean, if somebody disappears, again, you're part of a well-known Hudson Bay company, the McKays of Hudson Bay. How does somebody just disappear? Poof. I mean, wouldn't your family members look for you? Wouldn't your brother, who was friends with Cuthbert Grant, look for you? Wouldn't there be some reference to this person somewhere? Yet, I just, this completely boggles my mind. That's where I've said before that the dates here are very, very important. The first will, Cuthbert Grant leaves his wife money, their son money. Another will in 1822 leaves his brother-in-law, his first wife's brother, money. I don't understand that. So in Cuthbert Grant of Granttown, it says this, and I quote, "He had returned to the Northwest, also full of thoughts of Betsy and their child, their son James. He had many long thoughts of them during their extended separation when he was in Montreal, sitting in the gaoler's quarters, making the will which provided for their future." And it goes on to say that the money was from his father, Cuthbert Grant Sr.'s estate. It is also made mention in this book that Cuthbert Grant Jr., he knew that the money that he left Elizabeth Betsy would make her a woman of means and importance in the Red River country, and that perhaps his son might have a better life than he had. So very important, Cuthbert Grant of Granttown. The statement is that when he was writing his will, he knew that the sum of money that he left his first wife, Elizabeth Betsy, would make her a very wealthy and important woman in the Red River country. So why on earth would a wife disappear knowing that her husband, should something happen to him, would make her a very wealthy and important woman in the Red River country. I mean, this statement in Cuthbert Grant of Granttown totally validates the March 17th, 1818 will of Cuthbert Grant. But it goes on to say, but he found on his arrival that the one happiness which he had thought remained to him was gone. Betsy had disappeared and had taken their child with her. It seemed the end of everything, and the happy dreams that had helped to sustain him in his troubles were ended, were gone. So, if this reference is true, it shows you that Cuthbert Grant Jr. cared a great deal for his first wife, Elizabeth, and their son, James. He cared deeply. Um, the statement says that when he was in the gaolers waiting to be on trial, it was the thought of Elizabeth, Betsy, and their son James that kept him going, kept him strong through these trials and tribulations. So, what truly happened to Cuthbert Grant Jr.'s first wife, Elizabeth Betsy McKay, and their son James? If Elizabeth knew that Grant cared for her so deeply and was leaving her a very substantial sum in his will to make her a woman of means and importance in the Red River country, why would she just disappear? And at that particular time in 1818, having a half-breed woman of means and importance, I mean, that may have been a threat for a lot of people in the Red River colony. I don't know. There's a lot of scenarios that could take place. And again, I think it's important to note, in again, Cuthbert Grant Jr. at the beginning was a Northwest Company man, and he married Elizabeth Betsy McKay, whose father was a very important chief trader of the Hudson Bay Company. So they fell in love and got married during a very tumultuous times in history when the Northwest Company and the Hudson Bay Company were at odds. They were mortal enemies. They wanted to have supremacy over the fur trade. So, you know, I really are under the train of thought, and this is my opinion. I'm going to dig deeper and research more based on, there's compelling evidence from various sources. Why wouldn't anybody in Elizabeth Betsy's McKay family, did anybody look for her? Did they hide her? Did they care that she disappeared? I mean, I don't care what day and age it is. If a family member disappears, you try your darndest to look for her. You just don't say, "Oh, you know, one day I woke up and my sister just uh, vanished off the face of the earth." Oh, okay. There's more to the story, more to the story, and I think it has a lot to do with, in my opinion, until I can validate this further, the disillusion that Cuthbert Grant had with the Northwest Company after the victory at Frog Plain, when he felt he was standing alone on an island. He was carrying out what they told him to do. And then he was the fall guy. He was the patsy at the end. That had a lot to do with, I think, if Elizabeth Betsy disappeared, in my personal opinion, unless I can validate it historically further, that she certainly did not disappear by her own free will. you know what? Through things that I've read, I'm leaning towards foul play. And I think that, you know what, maybe the Northwest Company, at the Northwest Company again, using him as a pawn, and maybe someone within the Hudson Bay Company after the victory at Frog Plain wanted to hit Cuthbert Grant where it really hurt, and why not go after a family member? Because we have seen in this episode where he cared deeply and truly, according to this source, for Elizabeth, Betsy, and their son James. That's what got him through when he was in Montreal on trial. So certainly, when you have somebody that you're using or whatever, get back at them by hurting a family member. These are just my opinions, my subjectures in regards to these historical accounts. Grant entered really into a second marriage, Depays, with Marie Madeleine Desmiris, and the union seemed to be sort of really short-lived, and it ended in 1820 with, of course, the birth of a girl named Maria. So very short union, and maybe Cuthbert Grant, like I said, still pining for his first wife, Elizabeth Betsy, not truly understanding what happened. And he did place the child, the girl Maria, in the care of his sister, who my line goes through, Mrs. John Wills, who afterwards brought her to live with Cuthbert Grant when he had really settled. So, as we end this historical segment, and I'm not really satisfied with somebody with historical references, fate unknown. So we have a woman and her child just poof disappear. You know what? Again, I'm leaning towards the possibility of foul play, that Elizabeth Betsy did not disappear willingly. We have, at this particular tumultuous time in history, the Northwest Company, Hudson Bay Company, Pemmican Proclamation, so much going on in the Red River Colony. So, again, I hope you found this segment interesting. It truly is a mystery that deserves to be solved. I don't think anybody deserves to vanish off the face of the earth without having family members know what truly happened. Again, I'm still perplexed why nobody in the McKay family, even her brother, that Cuthbert Grant left a tidy sum in his will, doesn't mention, okay, what happened to my sister? So there's more to this Metis mystery that meets the eye, folks, and rest assured, I'm going to keep on digging, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this mystery. So, again, folks, thank you to all my listeners and supporters. It means the world to me. And take care of each other and stay safe. And remember, Metis people, kinship and community is very, very important. And I wished that the true aspect of kinship would have been given towards Cuthbert Grant Jr.'s first wife, Elizabeth Betsy McKay, by her own family, and wonder what happened to her. Take care.